Hello, my friends. Here we are again. Day 2 of our 10-day journey of self love and emotional healing. And today, the topic that we are going to consider, the idea is start where you are. That sounds so fundamental, but think about it for a second. We so often want to be somewhere where we are not. And we engage, like we talked about yesterday, the inner critic to complain and explain and talk to us about what's wrong with us and why we aren't where we want to be, why we aren't somewhere else other than where we are. So we set ourselves up in this dilemma emotionally, mentally, and energetically, that we're criticizing ourselves, criticizing the world. We're creating this energy that is not helpful and supportive. But when we expand our capacity to accept where we are and start where we are, then suddenly those charges, those emotional charges, don't have the same power over us, and we are starting from a blank slate, so to speak. And we can, from there, make different choices. And we can enjoy where we are. And through that enjoyment, we can create more enjoyment. We take a lot of pressure off of ourselves and off of the world when we can simply start where we are. You can't be anywhere else anyway. You might as well start where you are. One of the things that in real life makes this a challenge is the fact that the process of moving from where we are to somewhere else, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationships, work, whatever the situation is, life is not linear. Time is chronological, but the becoming something new, having a different experience, being a different person is non-linear. Oh, and by the way, not only is it not linear for you, it's also not linear for the people around you, the world around you. Y'all, this is what life is. It is complex, and we have been sold this image that it should be simple. And if we would just find the one right answer, that would be the thread that pulls the whole thing into a different state. And it should be that simple. But the reality is it's not. Now, there are some things that we can do that can be leveraged, and they have a tremendous impact. That is true. And they can change a lot of things very quickly, but it's also true that small incremental changes over time add up to big changes. And life systems are rarely as simple as the industrial factory model of creation that we have been sold that is what life ought to be. So, there's another aspect, which is dualism. And being able to move from the idea of black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, good and evil, that those are the words that we default to. And with that comes judgment and projection of a value and a determination of something's worth based on this dualistic either or, one or the other, right or wrong. It can't be something different or in between, and it has to be one gradient of those types of words. is also very limiting. That understanding limits the possibilities, and it certainly limits the possibilities of self-love because we express those judgments towards ourselves as well as towards others. So being able to move out of non-dualistic thinking is also very helpful. And the work that we started on yesterday with the polyvagal nerve, or the polyvagal theory, the vagus nerve, resetting our autonomic nervous system, gets us into this place where we can have a broader perspective, a broader worldview that is, we're less likely to be threatened by a thing that is bad or wrong because we're out of that, and that helps us also to modify ourselves out of this dualistic thinking. Another thing about starting where you are is this idea of, dear, just own it. Just own the person, the thing, the way, the emotion, the state, the behavior, just own it. Own your style. Own your hair. Own your body. It is what it is. And, oh, by the way, throw in a little law of manifestation here. You have manifested who you are and how you are being in this moment. Oof. That may be part of why we have a really hard time sometimes really facing ourselves and acknowledging where we are and the truth and the extent of the truth of where we are in this moment. Now, I'd like to introduce a broad concept in this idea that we've manifested where we are. We've created our lives. I believe so much of that has been unconscious. And we can go back again to yesterday's lesson where we talked about how we have been programmed chemically, biologically, as well as intellectually and logically from before birth. Okay, so when you can say, all I'm doing is playing out the programming that I have been born into, then can you take some pressure off of yourself and of others, honestly, for where they are being in the moment, and just say, this is it. I acknowledge it and I accept it. By the way, let's go back to non-dualistic thinking. Just because you accept it doesn't mean you like it or prefer it, but you accept it. And in that is love. In that is self-love. In that acceptance. And in that is a grace that says, okay, this is what it is. This is what it is. My dog is at my feet and he has gotten up and he's squished in the space that he's put himself in and he's coughing. And I'm not going to be able to stop that. And I could ignore it or I could acknowledge it. And do I prefer it? No, I don't, because I have myself on a timer today. And it's a distraction. But it is reality. And ignoring it makes that distraction all the more. Because then we're like, what's the problem here? Or we're ignoring that there's something going on. And that's not helpful. So, own the thing. Give yourself permission to own it, to be exactly the way that you are. Give it some grace, some love, some acknowledgement. When we can get into inner child work and speaking to that part of ourselves that is concerned or threatened or distracted by the circumstances of life, or that's trying to ignore the circumstances. It doesn't want to be seen. The ego doesn't want to see the thing, the hurt, the harm, the concern, the fear that is expressing itself in inconvenient ways that we didn't intend because it's still unconscious. but by bringing our consciousness to it and accepting that part of ourselves. That is an expression of self-love. There are inner child healing, there's self-reflection tools that we can also get into, but not in the context of today. So I want to share with you the idea of the Competency Square. If you haven't heard about it yet, and that's the label that I've tossed on it. I'm not sure. I haven't done my research to be able to tell you who initially came up with it, but it's the idea that to move into competency, there is unconscious, incompetent. You're unconscious that you are incompetent of a thing, and you're just being. And then you become conscious that you are incompetent of a thing. And the unconscious incompetence is the one that creates the chaos in your life, or the results that you don't like. And then, but you have to become conscious that you're incompetent in a skill or a way of being. And then you're like, oh, that's my thing. That's the owning it, right? That's the first step of owning it. And then there's the becoming, let's see, we've gone from unconscious incompetent to conscious incompetent to conscious competent, which is the learning the skills. It's learning how to do the thing better that you didn't even know you weren't doing before. So that's the learning, the researching, the investigating, the watching other people, learning and applying, and continuing that until there comes a point where you're you're unconsciously competent. Now you don't even have to think about the thing. You don't even have to be conscious, because it's so ingrained and it's so a part of who you are that you don't have to think about it. So the Competency Square. And in that, can you identify yourself in various parts of your life of where you are on that scale? And can you use that as a mental evaluation tool? And particularly for giving yourself grace for the things that you would like to do differently. You would like to have different results in your life, but you haven't learned the whole cycle yet. And you know that you can. You can go from unconsciously incompetent to unconsciously competent, and it won't happen overnight. And that's okay. It's a process. Remember, life and living is complex. It just is. All right. Trying to get close to wrapping this up. As I have promised, we would come in at 15 minutes. Don't buy into the marketing and programming of the world around you that tells you that it should be simple. You should know all of the answers, and you should be able to get right from where you are to where you want to be just because now you know the difference. No, it's a process, and you have to learn the skills and come to this place of unconscious competence. I encourage you to allow that inner critic to reveal to you the places where you aren't accepting yourself as is. The inner critic that we talked about yesterday, about how to calm it, redirect it. And one of the ways you can do that is to bringing consciousness to when you hear the inner critic's voice. What is it trying to bring your attention to? And what are the values underlying? What are the threats that inner critic, whose job is to keep you safe, what is it revealing to you? What does it want you to pay more attention to? And how can you go about bringing more awareness and grace and love to that part of you and your life and the world? Don't try to do it all at once. And I promise we will get into some inner child work, um, and I have some more tools to share. But we're at time today, and I honor you and your time. Thank you for joining me. Drop questions. If you have some, I will do my best to answer them, create some more lessons around other things. And for those of you who have joined the 10-day journey live, you can find that in our Facebook group. And if you didn't make it live and you'd still like to participate, just send me a message and I will get you in. All right, y'all. Be good, be loving, be kind.